Well, the first thing is to just deeper reflect, like what exactly is happening. Another thing I talk a lot about in my book are personality factors. So, and I use the 5-factor model of personality, which is the openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And what I found, because I did this for my dissertation, it was one of the things I researched, and I found what was primarily the most glaring finding of my research at that time was that actors that were high in neuroticism, which is like your reactivity, anxiety, easily prone to anxiety, and low in conscientiousness, low in discipline and focus, were actually more likely to self-sabotage. So there's a lot of strategies in my book to work on resiliency, work on improve your mindset, and reframe, failure as feedback. So there's no such thing as failure, only feedback. So looking at your failures as feedback and taking them as learning experiences, that's one of the biggest things. And then also increasing your conscientiousness as an actor, taking classes, becoming more associated with people that are already working. So I mentioned this in my book. I borrowed this from Tony Robbins and Jim Rohn, who one of their main principles with success is proximity is power. So associate yourself with high achieving performers, other successful working actors. Listen to their podcasts, go into their online communities, consume all their content. So this way you can start adapting those strategies, becoming more focused, while reframing the idea of failure. And that will, I always market myself as more of a mindset type coach. I'm not an acting coach. I don't teach the techniques of acting. There's plenty of great teachers for that. However, I feel like the work this can do with mindset and all that is complement the acting training. So while I may not be able to make somebody a better actor per se without technical training, I can make you the best actor you can be at the moment by, improving your mindset. When you improve your mindset, improve your attitude, you'll start to see that your performance is more efficient, and you might notice that you book more work, and secure more, because you're not in your own way anymore.
Hey, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter, the great place where we get together with amazing authors and writers and people who serve the community. And Albert's here today, and I'm so excited to have him on the podcast because he's got a great book, and he's really going to help us to overcome some of the things that get in our way. And he works with people and helps them to get on stage, get in on movies and television, and he serves a great audience. And the fact that he has time to be with us, I think we're all going to benefit from this. Albert, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. Glad to have you here.
Hi, Dave. Thank you again for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Excellent. Tell everybody where you live. Albert, where are you?
So I am in New Jersey, but I work in New York City, so I'm right on the East Coast.
Nice. Excellent. Now, we got to talk a little bit about what you do, Albert, because I'm fascinated by this. I found you on IMDb, by the way, which is interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit more about who you serve through your agency.
Sure. So my agency is Bramante Artists. We are a full-service talent agency in New York. So we represent actors for film, TV, theater, commercial, print, and voiceover. And this is something that we really do. We serve, professional actors from all ages. I have kid, as young as 7 and as old as 87. So it ranges. It's a wide range of talent that I represent. Of actors from all types, all walks of life. And, I've been doing this for about 20 years.
And you've also been in front of the camera as an actor, is this true?
That's partially true. But this was, I started off a little bit just interested in performing arts. So I was in the drama club in high school.
Okay.
So I was very much into the performing arts to some aspect. I took some classes in college, my undergrad in theater and acting, and I really liked it. I just liked the environment. Now, I'll be honest, the acting thing wasn't for me. It really wasn't something that I found necessarily fulfilling. However, what I did enjoy was being on set, being around actors, the energy of actors. And so what I really found myself doing was I really want to work with actors.
Okay.
And I really want to just, continue to do this type of work but not be in front of the camera. So I started going to film festivals, volunteering in film festivals, volunteering at different actor networking events, hosting events. And it just became very interesting. Like I really want to continue working with actors. And as I was doing these events, I would meet and accrue like a network Rolodex of actors that were in New York City. And I started working with some filmmakers who were like, "Hey, I need this for my film. I need this type for my film. Do you have anybody?" And I started making these recommendations, and these people were booking and actually, were getting the roles. And I realized, well, this is fun. It's like it's like fitting pieces together in a puzzle.
Right.
And I was like, this is fun. I always loved puzzles. So I figured, why not do this as a career? And so I launched my first company in 2004
Okay.
and kind of never looked back since. So it really gives me fulfillment to work with actors.
Nice. I like this. The one thing that I hear when I listen to other actors on like podcasts and stuff, I think recently it was an episode of Smartless actually, and Jason Bateman was talking about the fact that when they come to the end of filming, it's like they lose their job and they have to go get a new job for the next thing. So you're always in the stage and process of being hired, working on a project, and then basically, in a sense, being let go of that project because it's over, and then starting all over again. And it's just this kind of this odd feeling of not having a secure, everyday, predictable thing. Do you kind of work with your group and the people through your agency on that?
Yeah, I mean, the lifestyle of an actor, or really anybody in the performing arts industry, it's a gig economy, which
Yeah.
means it's only gig to gig. It's not like a job in the corporate sector, the 9 to 5 sector, where you work in a company for 10, 20, 30 years, get a nice cushy retirement package, and
Right.
you're set to go. Here, it's per job, and that job can last anywhere from a day to 6, 7 months to a year at most. And then the thing that happens now, you got to prove yourself all over
Right.
again to new people. So unless you become like an A-lister, where like your household name, you still have to audition every time for a new project, and so it can sometimes be taxing a bit. And especially because it's a really saturated profession, overly saturated. Unfortunately, there's several 100,000 actors just in the United States alone, and there's only a limited number of roles. So if that makes sense, that you're going to get more no's than you're going to get more yeses,
Right.
and that is going to add up over time
Okay.
to the actor's psyche, to the actor's mental health, because it's constantly trying to prove yourself, and you're really only as good as your last gig. So it's not like you're going to automatically get roles just because you had a role before. I've even had actors that were like series regulars on TV shows, and after the TV show is canceled, they're right back down just to square one again,
Yeah.
and they have to find the next job. So it can sometimes be a bit taxing, a bit draining mentally on that, even though it's an exciting, field. And most actors that I work with are 100% completely passionate about the field.
Like, what about some sense of identity, Albert? Like when you get onto a show and you're filming and it's exciting and you got routine and you got income, which is always a good thing, and you're doing this job and you're loving it. How easy is it maybe to slide into the fact that you have a position or a role that becomes your source of
Well,
identity?
it can be, and especially there's a style of acting known as method acting, where you
Yeah.
take a role, you don't just play a role, you almost you embody the role.
Yeah.
It becomes you. And sometimes actors can get lost in those types of roles, especially if it's really playing a dark character. And I've heard this a lot of times from actors, that who play these roles, is that it's a little hard time to adjust after,
Right.
especially if you played this role for months at a time, day in and day out. It becomes part of your identity. And we saw that tragically in the case of Heath Ledger, for instance.
Right.
Some were saying that it was after the Dark Knight that kind of just was like the the end, like the end of the line for him.
Yeah.
And I would suspect, with my background in mental health, that there were things prior to that that were adding up.
True.
However, it was just that was a breaking point. I feel was the break, the Dark Knight role
Yeah.
that he had played. So, and that added up over time, and that could sometimes happen. And this is why we sadly see a lot of actors with substance abuse and mental health problems and concerns, because of a lot of times just the demands of the profession sometimes, and you become a lot of times identify as a part you play, not necessarily who you are.
Mm-hmm.
I was once reading an interview with Anthony Hopkins, and this is right, soon after the Hannibal movies were released, and he was like, "This is great," but a lot of people were coming up on the street and were like quoting Hannibal to him, like doing Hannibal quotes to
Right.
him. And, he's like, at first it was a little bit flattering and fun. And afterwards it just got really annoying and old.
Yeah.
And it became a point where it's like, look, I'm much more than that. I was just playing a role. I was reading a script that somebody else wrote and just having fun with that role. But a lot of people were identifying with that. And a lot of times, even like, I also heard like the cast of Sopranos, when that was like, in its heyday, a lot of people were like, punching on the street and like yelling, heckling them like the mafia is bad.
Right.
And look, guys, I'm not affiliated with a mafia. I'm playing a role on TV.
Yeah.
I'm just me, and that's why I think a lot of times the public may not fully grasp. I mean, obviously, if that's happening as an actor, you're doing a great job in that role.
Right.
However, it can be a bit taxing, because also then people want to get to know, like one of the demands, the problem, I think the drawbacks of being a celebrity is people want to be around you, but it's not because of you, it's because of the roles you're playing.
Right. Yeah.
And that can be a bit of a concern too, coming up with identity. It's like, look, well, these are pretend. I'm playing pretend, really, if you think about it, and yet people are taking this way too seriously.
Like when we see actors on the screen, we have this idea that they may not wrestle with the things that normal humans wrestle with, like, self-doubt and imposter syndrome, all these things that we, as a non-actor famous person on the screen, we don't think they're not like us. They're like a different level of us. We think of like a Robin Williams, right? And you're like, this guy's just full of joy and full of giving and kind, but we're still human beings at the end of the day. Even though they have a role and they're still famous and star on Hollywood Boulevard, they're still humans and go home by themselves at night and wrestle with things as well, right?
And I think Robin Williams was a wake up call on that, because a lot of people were thinking, even afterwards, after he had committed suicide, was, well, how could he do that? He was such a lucky and happy man. I'm like, no, that's what you were seeing on TV. That's what they wanted you to see.
That's a character.
That was a manufactured persona of Robin Williams. There's a much more layers to Robin Williams. Even Jim Carrey, for instance, a lot of people associate Jim Carrey with, fun-loving physical comedian who does these, sometimes over the top, foolish antics on TV.
Right.
And he's been known for that. But he's also a very deep intellectual and spiritual person. If you, listen to and watch interviews with, he's not performing. He's much more deeply complex individual. And a lot of times that happens where a lot of people don't understand. Even when the late James Gandolfini would be out in public, people would be yelling, "Hey, Tony Soprano, good to see you." I'm like, and he would turn around and goes, "That's not, I'm not Tony, I'm James."
Yeah.
So it's a different thing. And also sometimes these actors are totally different than the parts they play.
Right.
And again, I've heard certain interviews, I've heard even from James himself, he would say, like, look, James Gandolfini, Tony Soprano are two different men.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times people don't understand that with actors. But also, a lot of times what happens is getting the word no all the time.
Right.
And it's like, well, Kyle, I'm a professional working actor, but why haven't I been working for the past year or two? And sometimes it could be, because some actors can go years without a job, an acting job, or a stable acting job, so it can sometimes be add up where it's like, well, I'm supposed to be, the identity of an actor, but I haven't been working lately.
Yeah.
And so that sometimes happens. And then occasionally, sometimes I would work, sometimes talk to an actor who is having a hard time with, should I stay in a profession? Should I not stay in a profession?
Right.
And I often would say, because what's really feeding your soul? And they will say, like, I like storytelling. Well, then, okay, let's stick to that. And one simple reframe that we could do, what I often try, work to explain with the actors, because it is a challenge thing, is to take the audition and look at it as a performance opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than just stigma of this audition, because that puts a lot of pressure on you, look at it like, I have 2 minutes to perform, still prepare fully, of course, but still look at these 2 minutes as the opportunity to perform and do your best at it. And when you can do your best at it, and look at it as a performance, not a test, but a performance.
Right.
And that's what I hear a lot of working actors. I heard this from Bryan Cranston in interviews. I've heard this a lot with other character actors that you may not know by name, but you see them on screen because they're almost in every TV show. And they will often say is that those 2 minutes that they're in the audition room, it's a performance. They're working. They're not auditioning. They're working. And if you look at it like that, then you'll be working almost every week as an actor. Now, you may not be getting financially compensated for that, but you're still working for that. Mm-hmm. And, the reality is that 96 to 97% of actors in the country need other jobs to supplement their income. Only 2 or 3% can actually really say that they make a living as an actor, because the cost of living is extremely expensive, especially if you're living in one of the metropolitans like New York, Atlanta, or LA, which is 3 main areas of the United States that are, production hubs.
I've had the honor of having some actors from movies and television on my show. And I think the one thing I try to do as a host of the show is to kind of get through the initial, like, I can't believe you're on my screen, I love your work, but get to the human side of why they're here, right? Their book, their project, because I want to honor that. I don't want to ignore all of the hard work that they put into their craft, but I don't want to be so, oh my gosh, and kind of gushy and all that on my show. I want to treat them like human beings on the show and honor them on what they're here to talk about, right?
That's what I really hear a lot of these actors say, that they just want to be treated like human beings. If they're out having dinner with their family, they want to be just left alone. It's not that they... And very often you'll hear these stories, oh, this actor was nasty in public, this actor... Well, that's because they were just being heckled for 2 minutes straight, and they're with their family. What do you expect?
Yeah.
So I think, just treating them with respect is important, and treating them as people is really the main thing.
Again, going back to your Robin Williams example, different layers of him, right? We only see 1 or 2 layers on film, but there's more to him, right? We need to honor that.
And Robin Williams said that, actually, in interviews where he felt lonely because nobody really wanted to get to know him.
Right.
They saw this persona on TV.
Yeah.
And not every role that he played sometimes dramatic roles, and he also played some sick and twisted
Yeah.
roles
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk, Albert, about your book and maybe kind of how this feeds into our conversation. I think we kind of laid a nice foundation here. But
I agree. I
yeah,
agree.
what's the idea of the book?
So when I first started 20 years ago, the one issue that was concerning me was the fact that a lot of actors were shooting themselves in the foot,
Yeah.
self-sabotaging, at least the ones I was meeting and encountering. So they would say like, I want to audition, and I'm really passionate, I'm really hungry, I want to audition. And then every time I would get them on an audition, this was not every actor, but a good few would either come up with excuses of why they couldn't do it, or they would be late, or sometimes even just say, I don't feel like going to the audition. And I couldn't figure out what was happening because, especially the actors that were no showing, I would often think, look, I have so many people that would be dying to get that
Right.
audition and that would go in a heartbeat. Why are you giving this up? And I think that there was one story which really made me really want to study this in detail. I had got an actor a lead, like a contract, or audition for a contract role on a Nickelodeon show. This was back 2006 around.
Well,
And it was a lead role. So she would be in every episode, and she had the in-person audition. An hour before the audition happens, I get a phone call from her saying, and it was a voicemail, and it was, I can't do this, and hung up. And I never heard from her since. Tried calling her, and she wouldn't return my phone calls. And that was it. I haven't seen her name anywhere, so I don't know what happened, and or figure out what happened. So it took me at this point wondering what is going on. So I was also going at this time enrolled in a PhD program. And we have to do for a PhD, we have to do this monumental dissertation, which is a
yeah.
thesis kind of like on steroids,
Right. Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
where
yeah.
it's hundreds of pages. That's the best way I can kind of say it. So I was figuring out, what am I going to do this on? And then this kept happening. So I went in for my meeting, my first meeting with the faculty there, to start talking, brainstorming with the topic. And I just said, I'm just going to ask, okay, what's up with these actors? And I was explaining the self-sabotage. And my advisor looked at me and said, that's brilliant. And go with it. So my dissertation for my PhD was self-defeating behavior in performing artists.
Okay.
And so, I received my PhD in 2015. And when I was defending my dissertation, which for those of you who don't know, you have to go through a process of defending where you're asked questions about it. It's not as daunting as it sounds. It's not as overwhelming as it sounds.
Yeah.
It's pretty much a straightforward process. You just have to kind of back up what you did. So I did that, and at the end of the call, my advisors, my committee members, said, "This is groundbreaking. You should do something with this." And I kind of put it in a back burner for several years because I had just got busy with other stuff. And for like the past couple of years, I kept saying, I want to write a book. And I should turn this into a book. So, and I'll call myself out. I kept procrastinating on it. I kept being perfectionist where, I would start writing and then delete, and then start writing and delete. And I was part of a self-publishing mastermind group, which the goal was to help first-time authors produce books. And there were two pieces of advice that really stuck out for me. One, well, not necessarily advice, but one statement was that only 1% of people who say they want to write a book actually do it.
Wow.
So there's 99% of people who, will say they will write a book and they never will. And I was very easily, that other 99%. So I said, okay, I worked hard. I put time and money, blood, sweat, and tears in the dissertation. Why not tell the world about it? So I said to myself, okay, I'm going to write. The second piece of advice, and this is for anybody who's listening that's a writer or wants to write a book, the advice I was told, which really helped me immensely, was write first, edit later. Do not edit while you write.
Okay.
And that was a game changer for me. So in 2023, I said, I'm going to set aside 2 hours a day. I'm just going to write. And I'm going to write until it's done. And about 2 months later, for scheduling it, I had a manuscript. And then I went through a couple of runs of professional editing. Hired 2 different editors to kind of look at the product. And they, after I incorporated their changes, I went right to the press. And then Rise Above the Script is born. So the book, even though it's written for performing artists, there's a lot of stuff that can benefit almost anybody who deals with self-doubt and self-sabotage, which is, I think, the entire human race.
Right. Yeah. I see it in podcasting too. I see it the same thing. People are like, I don't know if I can do this. Don't know if I like my voice. Who would ever listen to me? All this, right?
And I was, hear from a lot of like the, podcast education space that only, only 10% of podcasts make it past episode 7 or 8. Yeah. And that boggles my mind too, because I'm thinking that you're spending money investing in gear, you're investing in equipment, technology and equipment. Wouldn't you at least want to put out several episodes? And I would imagine, just like with actors, they don't see traction after a couple episodes and think, okay, I'm done. Therefore, I'm not going to produce anymore. And it may take 10, 20, 100, 200 episodes before you get something that takes off. And also, podcasting is evergreen, so you never know when you could do an episode 6 months ago, and all of a sudden that just triggers and starts going viral.
Right. Yeah.
But if you gave that up, you never would have known that. Yeah. So the self-doubt comes in, especially. I think anytime you're a content creator, there's a lot of people that have messages that we'll never hear from them.
Right.
Because they're too scared to start. So my advice usually for anybody in the performance space or is anybody in content, just do it.
Yeah.
Take action. Because I often say that someday doesn't exist. There's no someday in the calendar.
I like that one. That's good.
Because, and I'll hear people say, yeah, I want to start a podcast. Because I tell people, like, I'm guesting on a podcast. And I'll hear people say, well, I would love to be in a podcast. Someday. Yeah. And my question is, okay, what's stopping you?
Yeah.
Because technically, you could start on your phone. You can start putting content out there. Or invest in equipment, which is not that expensive to start with.
Yeah. I love that one. Someday is not a day on the calendar. I like that.
It's true. It's absolutely true. And usually, because it's not on the calendar, it most likely will not happen until it becomes on the calendar. So what we could do is challenge when people say, well, someday I'll start a podcast. Okay, when?
Someday I'll write a book. Someday I'll be an actor, right?
Yeah, someday I'll be an actor. Someday I'll write a book. Someday I'll be in a movie. Well, when? When do you start? And that's where accountability comes in. And so that's even with me when I probably would have been sitting here right now in 2025 if I didn't put it on my calendar and say, someday I'm going to write a book.
So, Albert, this book then, how would this book have possibly, I know we're kind of thinking hypothetical, how could this book have helped that actor ahead of that Nickelodeon, opportunity? What in this book could possibly have given that person a little bit more perspective to show up for that audition?
Dealing with fear.
Okay.
Because a lot of times we have fear of failure, which is obviously most people have that fear. I mean, fear is an actual helpful response, believe it or not. Fear is actually there to protect us. It's what kept our species alive for thousands of years. However, it can sometimes give you an overdrive. What's often not talked about is fear of success.
Okay.
And I think that could have helped. Like, okay, what's really going on here? Because most people don't realize they have fear of success. It's not like you're never going to really hear people say, I fear success, but it's a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason it's a subconscious fear, because it's all rooted in the fear of change. It's easy to stay comfortable. Yes, we want this change. We obviously, you'll hear people say, I have all these lofty goals. But a lot of times to achieve those goals, you have to step outside your comfort zone. And you have to do things that are not entirely comfortable.
There's a loss of control in that moment, too.
Right. There is that loss of control there. So in that case with the actress from Nickelodeon,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what was really going on, so I can't
Yeah.
100% speculate. But I can guess that it could be that her life was going to change.
Yeah.
Maybe she was getting pressure from her family and loved ones to leave the business, get a real job.
Yeah.
And that happens with a lot of the actors I know. Is a lot of times initially in the beginning, their family may not be entirely supportive of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I could speculate that their fear of success was a major player
Okay.
there, because her life would have changed. If she landed that role, yes, she would have had a lot more money and a lot more prestige, but her life would have changed. Now she would have become a public figure. Now
Right.
she would have having to perform 6-7 days a week for months on end and be away from her family and be away from her friends and be under a lot of pressure, because when you're in such high profile role like that, it's not just the days of performing. You then have to go on press releases.
Yeah.
You then have to go junkets and press events and all that stuff. And you have to constantly be on and for 12 hours, 14-hour
Right.
days. So that could have been saying in her mind, like, I'm not ready, which was that could have acted as a fear response to immediately just shut down and say, I'm not going to do this.
Okay. So what kind of things are we going to get from Rise Above the Script that we can actually put into our day to help us to overcome fear of success, fear of failure? What are some practical things that we're going to read in this book?
Well, the first thing is to just deeper reflect.
Yeah.
Like, what exactly is happening?
Yeah.
Another thing I talk a lot about in my book are personality factors. So, and I use the 5-factor model
Okay.
of personality, which is the openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism.
Okay.
And what I found, because I did this for my dissertation, it was one of the things I researched, and I found what was primarily the most glaring finding of my research at that time was that actors that were high in neuroticism, which is like your reactivity, anxiety, easily prone to anxiety, and low in conscientiousness, low in discipline and focus,
Yeah.
were actually more likely to self-sabotage. So there's a lot of strategies in my book to work on resiliency, work on improve your mindset, and reframe, failure as feedback. So there's no such thing as failure, only feedback. So looking at your failures as feedback and taking them as learning experiences, that's one of the biggest things. And then also increasing your conscientiousness as an actor, taking classes, becoming more associated with people that are already working. So I mentioned this in my book. I borrowed this from Tony Robbins and Jim Rohn, who one of the main principles with success is proximity is power. So associate yourself with high achieving performers, other successful working actors. Listen to their podcasts. Go into their online communities, consume all their content. So this way, you can start adapting those strategies, becoming more focused, while reframing the idea of failure.
Yeah.
And that will, I always market myself as more of a mindset type coach. I'm not an acting coach. I don't teach the techniques of acting. There's plenty of great teachers for that. However, I feel like the work this can do with mindset and all that is complement the acting training. So while I may not be able to make somebody a better actor per se without training, without technical training, I can make you the best actor you can be at the moment by, improving your mindset. When you improve your mindset, improve your attitude, you'll start to see that your performance is more efficient, and you might notice that you book more work.
Right.
And secure more, because you're not in your own way anymore.
Yeah. So the book is more focused on performing artists, but it does reach broadly outside of that scope as well and bring more
Absolutely,
people in,
absolutely.
right? So it's for a book for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned rates increased conscientiousness,
Yeah.
rates to increase openness, things that you can calm down to reduce neuroticism and reactivity. And I also talk about fear of success. Another thing that's often brought up related to fear of success is the psychology of money. A
Right.
lot of a lot of times we're programmed inadvertently that money is bad.
Yeah.
And one of the tenets, especially in my communities growing up, sometimes we receive the message that money is the root of all evil, and one of the things I address is that that's misquoted. That's a misquote. It's not that money is the root of evil. The original quote from the Bible was, "The love of
Love
money
of. Yeah.
is the root of all evil," and even that can be, you know, turned a little bit in question.
Yeah.
But because I feel like money, well, a lot of people, really said that money is neutral.
Yeah.
Money is a neutral constant. And so I talk a little bit about that and reframing ideas about money. So, because that can often inherently, work in our programming. If we are brought up to believe that all rich people are greedy and evil, then our subconscious mind is going to protect us by saying, well, we're not evil, so
Yeah.
I'll just block you from making money. And that's also going to be a cause of self-sabotage, of course. So let's talk about the relationship with money. And I have a whole chapter on that in my book about the psychology and relationships with money.
Right. And that would tie into the fear of success as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it is a unit, but I have a whole unit on fear of
Yeah.
success. And I talk about imposter syndrome, which is also very related too.
Yeah. Interesting. When I talk to people around podcasting, Albert, one thing I encourage them to do when they feel like they're not enough, when they feel like no one's ever going to follow me, listen to my show, care about what I think or what I say through a microphone, one practical thing that I get them to try to do is to write down a few things that they didn't know how to do in the past, but now they can do without even thinking. So it could be something very simple. But it was it was a task, is a thing you had to learn, a skill you had to master. And like I said, now you don't even think about it. So for me, for example, my car is a standard manual transmission car. So I have to change the gears manually when I drive. When I first started driving those cars, I was horrible. My car would be bouncing all over. I was doing it all wrong.
Yeah.
But now, after like 25 years, 30 years of driving that kind of car, I don't even think about it when I get in the car. I'm not even conscious of what I'm doing. It just becomes part of who I am. So in that, I've taught myself how to do that to the level of confidence where I don't feel intimidated by driving that type of car. So that becomes one of my wins, one of my examples that I can do things that I don't know how to do. As long as I invest in the time and practice and learn and get help, I can do these things. So anytime that you have this feeling of, I can't write the book, I can't go to that audition, I can't create a podcast, you look at this list of things that you've actually accomplished and use that as a source to counterbalance the feeling that in this moment, I don't feel like I have what I need.
That's excellent advice. That is really excellent advice out there to do that, to tell people, to use the example of driving. Because that kind of brings up the whole idea of like, conscious competence and unconscious competence.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Because now it's just unconscious to drive the car. You just know how to do it. I'll even do another example, learning to walk as a toddler. If anybody listening to raised children or had children or been around infants and toddlers, learning to walk, we take for granted, but that's an actual process to learn to use our motor nerves to step one foot in front of the other and balance ourselves. And infants and toddlers will fall down sometimes hundreds of times and stagger and stumble. You've never seen an infant or toddler say, I'm stop, walking's not for me, I quit.
I give up on this. Yeah, yeah.
I give up on this. No, they don't. And it becomes an ingrained habit. Learning to ride a bike, for instance, is another skill that takes time. So even with writing that book or doing that podcast, it's going to seem like work in the beginning. One thing I talk about in my book, which I'll bring up, and I'm sure can be applicable to podcasters too, is the idea of the happy file. So what I do for my actors, I recommend keeping a happy file. So an actual journal of every compliment they received from an audition, a class, an audience member, a casting director. If they get any type of compliment, they document that. They get a call back. They're putting in the mix in a short list for a role. You document that. And then when you have them go into self-doubt and you pull out that file and you see a list of things that you achieved. And that's the amazing thing. And also, you never know who you're going to impact.
Right.
And sometimes you may impact people that you may never hear about it. Because a lot of times, I'm sure with content creators, you may look at a video and see that it had 160 views, but maybe only a few likes,
Right.
or maybe one comment, but over 200 views. It was only the only one person chose to comment, but 200 other people viewed that video. You don't know if the thing you said impacted one or two of those people and changed their life.
Right. Yeah, you have no control over that. It's hard to manipulate that, and people will come and interact with it and tell somebody, or just the right person at the right time will be like, Albert, I have this role. I need this person. This is who I'm thinking of. I know you represent them. Can you send them my way? Because they did this other thing, unrelated, brought them into their world, and now they're curious enough to go seek them out through you. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. It really can make such a big thing there.
So the book goes beyond performing artists, but I think that the performing artists community could really benefit from this book. Specific to the people that you've intended to write the book for, what is your big wish for them as they pursue their career, and how this book will become a resource for them ongoing?
Well, the hope for that is it takes a lot of daily practice, and what I would often want to say is that self-doubt is a normal process that we all go through, and it's okay to sometimes question on things. The one thing that I would really say is don't deny the world of your power or your brightness, because there's a lot of things you can overcome, and we've already overcome a lot of stuff that you probably don't even realize. So the important thing is to just do it. Just go and do it. And even if you take small actions every day to step outside your comfort zone, I really feel that's going to be helpful. Whether that's going online, hitting the live button on social media and just talking for 2 minutes. Something as simple as that, or going to a new place or a networking event and meeting people. Do something different.
Yeah, and perspective, right? Your book can help us with perspective. I think when I get in my car, again, back to my car reference, the rearview mirror is small and my windshield is big, because I'm not going backwards, I'm going forwards. So I need to focus on the big window, the big picture.
The big picture, yeah. Yes. And enjoy the process too. This is meant to be enjoyable. And it is all about perspective. So one thing I will often, because I hear a lot of people say, I wish I could be an actor, but I can't stand that rejection. So what if you look at it in this perspective? There's no such thing as rejection. It's a simple reminder that your services are not needed today.
Nice.
So if you take it like that and look at it like that, it's not personal. And that's sometimes, because actors are really strongly emotional types. That's what helps you connect to a role. So a lot of times actors are empaths, which means they have a really strong feeling component. And, getting that no can sometimes be challenging and hard to hear.
Right.
So that can happen, so it can be sometimes hard to hear with things like, oh, I don't want to be told no, and all of that stuff.
Albert, where do people connect with you? I know I've found your Instagram and a few other places. I see you're everywhere, like on podcasts and doing great interviews. I want to make sure people can connect with you as well. And where should we be buying a copy of your book?
So you can find a copy my book on Amazon. I have it in different formats. I have the paperback, I have the Kindle, and I also have audiobooks. So it's on
Nice.
Audible and Spotify. So wherever most audiobooks are sold.
Good.
So I would recommend that. I also recommend them on, like I said, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. Feel out to reach out to me. You can go to my website, albertbramante.com. And if you're an actor, you can connect with my agency, bramanteartists.com. And yeah, I'd love to connect and hear from you.
Good. So you are still taking clients all the time then, Albert?
Oh, yeah. I mean, here's the thing. And then I want to talk about, I think, just briefly with
Yeah.
that. I can only handle so many clients at a time.
Yeah.
We get our agency, most agencies in New York get between 100, 200 submissions a week,
Wow.
which is a lot.
Wow.
Staggering amount of submission. I'd love to be able to work with a good number of these. I cannot. So I have to be very selective. I have to, look at, are they enough to be bookable? And also, one thing about, if anybody who's listening to this is an actor who's looking for an agent, one thing you have to also keep in mind, you could be very talented, but if an agent already has too many, a couple of people that are in your type,
Right.
it won't work at that moment, because it wouldn't be fair to the actors that are currently on the roster that match that. And it wouldn't be fair to you as a new actor
Right.
coming on that
Yeah.
roster. So keep that in mind. That's why I often recommend, when you're looking for an agent, to, when you pitch yourself to an agent, and you may get the first round, they may say no, or you may not hear anything. That's also another thing about which makes the performing arts industry difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Because very rarely, a lot of times, you will not get a direct no, you just won't hear anything.
Right.
And that goes for sometimes submitting for agents as well as auditioning.
Yeah.
So what I would say is, if you don't hear anything 6 months to a year, try it again. Because hopefully, 6 months to a year, you grew as a performer.
Right.
You should have more credits. You should have more experience. You should have better demo reel. So resubmit again, because things may change. I may not have an opening, because either an actor may leave the agency, or I might have an actor who booked a 6 months to 10, 12 months tour, and they're not available for me right at the moment. But now you are.
Yeah.
So we can use that.
Okay. Any little secret that we can have? Because the people here with us to the end of the podcast, Albert, they are your ideal potential clients to come work with you. Any little secret that would make you raise your eyebrow just a little bit if somebody was sitting across the table from you?
Here's a secret. Gather our people.
Okay.
Agents are people too.
Oh, good.
We're people. we get it. And we're on your side.
Yeah.
I want to open up that email and be like, this is a star. And if we bring you in for a meeting, we're not wasting your time. We really are genuinely interested in you.
Nice.
And the same thing when you get to an audition. Keep in mind that when you're going for that audition, they have a need that needs to be filled, a role that needs to be filled. So rather than looking at this intimidating experience, why not take the perspective of, I have what you need. I may have what you need.
Right.
And then take those 2 minutes and go to work.
It's great advice, Albert. I like it. It's great. Thank you for the book. I think it's far-reaching, helps many people in different situations. Mm-hmm. I can even see a parent benefiting from this book. So there's so much good stuff in here. A really great book. And I'm glad you've done this. Do you think, Albert, will you continue to write? Will there be something in the future for you as an author?
Yes. I have a couple other books in mind that I'm working on right now, outlines and putting together a little, outline and proposal for.
Excellent. When you have spare time, right?
Of course. But, now I'm taking action, because now that and that's the one thing, when you actually do something, it becomes much more easier to do the second and third time.
Yeah. Good. Take action, everybody, and go grab a copy of the book. Make sure you leave a great review. Albert would love to hear your thoughts about the book and how it helped you at your next audition, at your next big thing that you're going to create, how this book was a resource. Put that in the comments and in your review so that other people will see that it's really a great resource as we navigate self-doubt, mastering self-sabotage, and the fear of success. A lot of great things here. Albert, thank you so much for being part of the show.
Thank you, Dave, for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
Excellent.
I'm honored.
Hey, thank you so much again for pressing play. As you've heard, great guests on the show. And one thing you didn't hear in this conversation is what? What did you not hear? Think about it for a second. That's right. Not a single solitary commercial for a mattress or a supplement or a whatever you call it. No. Why? Because we don't want to break up the conversation with commercials. So the fact that you're still here means that you are a fan of the show, I'm assuming. So if you want to help to keep the podcast going and to make me feel really happy, all I really care about is coffee, okay? I just got to be honest. I love coffee. I'm drinking one right now. It's starting to get cold. I need to warm it up. Helping us with our Buy Me a Coffee link over at livingthenextchapter.com and also in the show notes helps kind of keep the lights on around here. Remember, I'm doing this for free. I'm paying for everything. So I would love to have a little coffee donation, even $5. Kind of fills up my cup. And I would love to enjoy a coffee from you. So if you're interested, again, thank you for listening. But you can use our Buy Me a Coffee link and fill up the cup. Thanks for being here.